this stuff, but the bottom line is between all those, the tabulators, the adjudicators, and the local data center with one another, we've already got Chris Thomas testifying that the local data center was connected to the internet. So the only question is, were there protections and layers in between that would give the appearance of an air gap? And I'm just telling you, I'm not the hacker that does this. I'm not a black hat that can go in and do this, but there are people that can do that.
I got it. So then it comes down to this.
Yeah.
How does one maintain the chain of custody in electronics?
Well, I think the only way to do that is what I was talking about, what usually happens in other precincts where the clerks are getting that information from an encrypted flash drive from a tabulator that's not connected to the internet, and then transferring that in a sealed envelope up to the county so that they can add it to the tabulator result to the other areas. That did not happen in Detroit. I never saw one flash drive transferred from a computer to another computer. There was a wall up on the wall all around the center. There's a red area that was supposed to be where they put out the final precinct tallies, just like you would see in most other precincts, if you will. That never happened. They had all the zero printouts from all the tabulators, which is good, so they had them printed up for the beginning of the counting day, but they never had the final tally printed up there at all. So I would be very curious, and this is an area that I think, frankly, the burden of proof is on the Secretary of State and the Board of Canvassers, which is, how do you verify that you maintain the chain of custody? Because I'd be very interested in their answer on that.
The data transmission, and Mr. Chairman, going to Senator Colbeck's point, we are all elected. We all put a vote up on the board, and I've never seen a fraction, so thank you for sharing that, because we don't have fraction votes. We have one vote for our district.
Yeah, I was joking that sometimes you don't feel like your vote means as much as some other people's votes, but it's kind of, you know.
The data transmission, though, of the fractional vote, has anybody ever questioned the software company and asked them, is that a possibility?
To the best of my knowledge, no, but it's undeniable that that's something that they use it for.
I guess if I was to ask, I think they're using the software in 29 states. Is that correct?
It depends on where you look. I've seen anywhere from 28 to 30. Yeah.
Okay. So we're right in the ballpark, just maybe a wrong base. But at the end of the day,
yeah.
Has anybody asked the software company, including maybe the Attorney General of this state, could you explain how this fraction tallied, how it was possible that a fraction could even be thought about?
To the best of my knowledge, no, but I do know that the state of Texas refused to procure Dominion voting systems because of security vulnerabilities.
Thank you very much for your testimony, and it's great to see you, Pat.
Right,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Lucido. Senator Tice.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Senator Colbeck, for all your work. I know you've been almost nonstop on this, so thank you. First off, can we get your presentation?
He's got it.
Great. And then secondarily, we were speaking about Antrim County, and this is something that I've focused on quite a bit. So the issues that happened for her happened once she finalized the election and then realized there were candidates that needed to get added onto it. So she locked it, and then she unlocked it, changed it, and relocked it again. All over the state, there were courts that ordered things on ballots after that deadline. And so I'm wondering, has anybody that you're aware of done the analysis in those communities to figure out whether or not those are accurate representations of what we would expect out of those communities?
I don't believe it's been done, and this is why it's so concerning. If it was literally, if it wasn't for Bill Bailey saying something's wrong here, there never would have been a recount. We never would have identified this software glitch / clerical error / whatever you want to call it. So no, I anticipate that this is across the spectrum. And when you look at what actually changed in there, to testimony we were looking at earlier, this is affecting down ballot. I mean, I know we're all focused in on presidential race here, but man, I'm concerned all across the state for down ballot issues too.
To your point, it was way down ballot that she was making the changes.
Yeah.
It was at a township, no, it was at a village
School board,
level,
yeah.
And then millage level. So you were at the lowest partisan, and then below that is what where the changes were being amended, and it affected all the way up to the top of the ballot. So I find that disconcerting, and I'm wondering if anybody's done the analysis on the other counties where changes were made last minute.
And gets into a whole topic of reform down the road, but I'll tell you one of the biggest challenges to this whole thing, why there's delay in some of this information coming out, is we've literally had an army of volunteers trying to get the precinct by precinct results just for the presidential election. Then we're working our way down to U.S. Senate, to congressional races. It's tedious as heck, and a lot of people here are part of that data warrior crew that's pulling this data together. But there's no reason we shouldn't have precinct by precinct roll-ups at the state level available for data mining analysis like you're suggesting.
And then, so there are a couple of things. One of the other commentaries that you said talked about having no registered voters. I know that many communities create a separate, just kind of a separate area where they're doing all of the absentee tabulation. So you won't show any in-person voting at that tabulation, but everybody is going to be absentee. And sometimes, I think, those registered voters would be reported within their precincts rather than in the absentee counting board. So I think it's possible that that might be, but I don't know. So again, we need to dig into it further, and I thank you for coming forward very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tice. Senator Colbeck,
Yes, sir.
when it came to the Antrim County issue, did you observe the testimony of the clerk before the committees?
No, I haven't seen her specific testimony. I've been looking at some of the affidavits that were based on that testimony.
So, I asked this question at that time regarding how such an anomaly may have been observed in a precinct, a county, where the weirdness of the result would not be as readily observable as it was obvious in Antrim County. And while we had some trouble speaking the same language to each other, I mean, the answer is that the tabulators that receive the votes and print up the tabulation sheet, those didn't demonstrate the inaccuracy that the software analysis did for the unofficial vote count that was announced. And so when the Board of Canvassers would come together to certify the vote at a later time, they would have easily noticed that the tabulation sheets were not in accord with the unofficial vote count that was announced by the clerk.
Yeah.
And so are you disputing that that's a correct answer, or is that answer satisfactory to you as to how we can, I'm not saying that recounts or audits shouldn't occur, but I'm just saying that answer would seem to me to suffice to show that some anomaly between what the software announces the vote is versus what the tabulators, any discrepancy there would be noticed by the boards of canvassers.
Not necessarily. And so when I was in my engineering days, we do something called a failure modes and effects analysis. So I try to identify all the possible things that could go wrong. And in this, we think it's actually a design feature of Dominion to keep that tally in sync with the printout. So there's another step that happens in between. And that's kind of an all-important step. First you scan it, then you allocate the vote, then it's printed. So in the translation between the scan and the vote tally itself, which is what gets printed on the card, which is supposed to correlate to the printout, as long as you make your transition or switch before that,
I understand
then,
that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I understand that vulnerability theoretically.
Yeah.
But in the case of Antrim County, the tabulator sheets were accurate upon rerunning the numbers. It was simply the software. So the idea that the software was changing both the tabulator and the computer announced votes didn't occur there. The tabulators turned out to be right on the money. It was just the other issue.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that what you're presenting isn't theoretically possible, but at least in Antrim County, that theory is not evidenced by what occurred.
Yeah, and I'm just, when I did in my testimony, I wanted to highlight all the different possibilities from a technical perspective on how that could be done. There are forensic experts that can testify to that specifically. And this gets to a fundamental issue that we've had since day one on it, is getting access to this information to go off and do that detailed forensic analysis. And I don't think it's limited to Antrim County.
How do we move, though, from what's possible
Yeah.
to what's actually happened.
By getting access to that actual data.
And so
those compact flashcards in particular are very important to get
and
access to.
the chain of custody
Yep.
issues, I recognize
Exactly.
that. So one other question, and then I have other members who are waiting. These possibilities, these possible vulnerabilities that you detailed seem to me to be undercut in Michigan, and I don't know other states, but at least undercut in Michigan by the fact that we maintain the paper ballots. And so the opportunity to recount and the fact that every election cycle there are random audits done that have continued to validate that the software has been accurate would seem to undercut this possibility it's happening or being something somebody would attempt to do in Michigan.
It gets into a very complex discussion because now it's conceivable you can go back in and prepare whatever ballot tally you want in physical ballot form to match the numbers that you want to have in the in the final vote tally. It's possible to go off and map that together, which is one of the reasons why it's so concerning as to how sloppy it was in Wayne County in regards to the idea of poll books balancing with the number of ballots that were out there. So I just want to highlight that I've focused in on vote tallies as part of the key issue on it, but where you're going starts taking us upstream as well into the ballots themselves, because you're looking and saying, hey, these are what the ballots said, there's no discrepancy associated with it. It gets into a discussion of where did those ballots come from? What was the chain of custody around those ballots? What's the chain of custody between the ballots and the person who was supposed to have voted for that ballot? Did you maintain that in the poll book with the verification? So all I'm suggesting on this is that I'm just zeroing in on how the heck did you transfer the results from tabulator A upstream to county and other areas? Is there evidence to suggest that there's a concern, not just in Antrim County, but keep in mind the other testimony that was for 289,000 votes that were pushed out as the official vote tally or whatever from those 4 counties that exceeded the complete scanning capacity of those 4 counties during that time frame. That's an explanation that I'd really like to see. So the stuff you're talking about, it's going to get into a detailed discussion of everything upstream of that chain of custody.
But Senator, help me understand, if a person or persons had the ability to stuff the box, you know, for, you know, just to borrow colloquialism,
electronically,
to stuff the box with the paper ballots, as you're mentioning, then what would the need be to have the software provide an accurate count? I mean, if you have the ability
for recounts,
I guess I'm just, it seems like one or the other is all that's,
no,
I'm not sure
I
why
mean, ultimately, when it's all said and done, I mean, you're going to go off and try to make sure that you have all this stuff in sync.
I'm sorry, to members, I have one other question, and this is a follow-up to Senator Lucido's question earlier regarding fractional voting.
Yeah.
Do you have actual paper or screenshots or something that show a fractional vote and where it came from, what that's referencing specifically?
This is in the affidavit provided by Russ Ramslander, and what they were doing, and it's probably too complicated to go into here, although I do have a slide that kind of demonstrates a little bit of the path I can get into. But this is an actual printout from Dominion Voting Systems and in their translate or their feed to all of the news outlets, and there's a whole chain of command that they go through for this data. And I was never interested in that. I was interested in seeing the flash up on the screen that says percentage of precincts reporting, what's the vote. But behind that simple number chase, there's a whole bunch of handoffs. And I think I've got this actually in a backup slide, so let me just double check here. Once you get an appreciation for all the different handoffs that this goes through, it starts making a little bit more sense. So let me...
Well, in the interest of everyone's time here, I mean, you said you've got it in the presentation, you've sent it to me, so I mean, I'll look for it. And you and I can talk offline, too.
Yep.
So is it okay if we move to the next question?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yep.
Senator McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellent analysis, Patrick. Quick question. The integrity of our elections, you're right about that. It's not a Republican or Democratic thing. It's just too important. Where is the Justice Department? Why aren't they looking into it?
That's a good question. It really is. I know Attorney General Barr has got a letter that was submitted a couple months before the election saying we need to be bird dogging any issues of election integrity, and I've been pretty outspoken about my concerns with the election. I've reached out to what do they call it, to Matthew Schneider in particular directly regarding here's some concerns we have. I put out op-eds out in the Detroit News to that effect, and all that's gotten me so far is being discredited by Judge Kenney saying because I was looking for voter fraud and found it that I'm not a credible witness. So, so I'm a little concerned about the lack of movement there, and there does need to be more engagement. But the bottom line is we do have a suit on the table right here in Michigan that's going to a federal court. That's a Sidney Powell lawsuit. We also have lawsuits that have been introduced by the folks at the Great Lakes Justice Center, and I'm affidavit in one of those lawsuits that's currently being considered by the Michigan Supreme Court. So there is legal action being taken. Why the prosecutors are not getting engaged in any productive capacity to this date, I can't attest to.
Yeah, it's very concerning. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Vice Chair Irwin.
Thank you, Chair. If you were a statewide candidate in Michigan in this last election with everything that you believe about election fraud, and you were on the losing end, much like, say, President Trump or candidate John James, would you have requested a recount?
I've got doubts with the integrity of the recount process, so I probably would not have done that. And by the way, just to put this in context, back in 2016, when President Trump did win Michigan explicitly, and Jill Stein ordered a recount, I was just as adamant about pursuing election integrity in the wake of that. I had one of my staffers that was out in Detroit, same place where we identified a lot of other problems right now, and she was there present when they came up and identified a poll book that said 306 votes were cast, but there's only 50 ballots inside of it. So I've been concerned about this from even when our top of the ticket guy is the victor.
So you would not seek a recount even though you believe there is fraud. You would seek remedy through the courts to just throw out votes and tally what was left? Is that your approach?
What I believe should be done, which was not done by the State Board of Canvassers and Wayne County Board of Canvassers, is a detailed forensic audit, because that's what a canvass is. It's an internal audit, essentially, is what it comes down to. And I wanted them to perform, and I still would like a performance of a detailed forensic audit. And as we identified, I mean, we talk about Antrim County. This isn't just a Wayne County issue. We don't know how many other counties this may have impacted that flew under the radar. It didn't have a Bill Bailey highlighting what was going on. I believe you need a full forensic audit. The key question is they haven't demonstrated chain of custody on any of the key election data. So, yeah, I'm concerned. You can't just go off and fix it with a recount of the ballot. That's downstream. If you've already got this whole chain of custody broken at the qualified voter file level and at the poll book level, what good's a recount going to do?
Well, I think that it's pretty telling that the Trump campaign did not request a recount in Michigan. It seems pretty clear to me that they know that a recount would mess up their current strategy, which is just to throw up a bunch of smoke and mirrors. And it's particularly telling also that you here, sir, in committee, you have continued to repeat information about Antrim County, and then when you were corrected with the testimony that this committee heard, you just go back and repeat the same old misconstrued statements about what happened in Antrim County. So forgive me if it's difficult after reading these lawsuits and listening to your testimony to understand even what you're talking about. We need some evidence, we need some proof. All we've got here are conjecture and musings by former Senator Kolbeck.
All right, well, I'll tell you, upstream, we talk about the recount issue in particular. You want to talk about some of the upstream concerns that have never been refuted. We got 8.1 million registered voters here in the state of Michigan. The only problem with that is demographic analysis shows that more than 300,000 and as high as 600,000 of those folks should not be on the voter rolls. So you want to go off and do a recount, you've already got a broken link right up at the top that says there's over 300,000 people that should not even be eligible to vote in the state of Michigan. You've got some serious problems when you even, the Antrim County and everything downstream of it, frankly, is is interesting side notes once you realize that somebody's breached the top link of the chain of custody. So how can you be confident in anything downstream?
Senator Santana.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you allowing me to sit at your table today, committee members. And as the only Detroiter up here today, I have a couple questions for you, Senator Colback.
Sure.
On Thursday, October 29th, the city clerk hosted a Challengers Conference where Chris Thomas and Daniel Baxter gave a detailed overview of the process. From what I understand, they provided a thorough explanation of all three steps of the orientation process by ballot recording information in the poll book, tabulating ballots through the ICC high-speed tabulators, and the adjudication process where the overvoted blank ballots and the write-in ballots were reviewed by teams composed of one Republican as well as one Democrat. Did anyone attend the conference?
To the best of my knowledge, we've been asking for when that would actually occur, and there's a gentleman here, he might be here, Phil O'Halloran. Phil, are you here? Phil can talk to that because we're specifically making repeated requests for information related to events like that, and I'll let Phil fill in the blanks associated with that, but I was very concerned. I can tell you, if I was notified about that meeting, I would have been there.
Well, it seems like, these things would have been addressed at that meeting, and that meeting was open to everyone. So it seems that, maybe your committee should have had some more communication with the city, but the city also provided that information as well.
Yeah, like I said, we'll let Phil testify, but believe me, there were attempts to do that, and I can tell you COVID was used as an excuse to push off meetings, to push off attendance at different things. There's a whole sequence of emails that I was working with folks to try to identify specifically when things like that would happen. We're concerned about the use of a Reliant scanning system to verify ballot signatures, for example. The Reliant system, when you want to go off, and the clerk's office will validate that the voter signature on the ballot envelope matches the one that we have in the qualified voter file. And if it doesn't, then they're not a qualified voter, right? So you can't go off and count their ballot. We wanted to know what was going on with that Reliant system. How was it being calibrated? Because if you calibrate that at a very permissive level, if you will, you're not going to filter out any bad signatures. And we also know that Reliant voting system is based on 8-point signature technology that was over 2 decades old. So it's not the latest and greatest you'll see with banking systems that are used today. So believe me, we were trying to get access to that type of information for quite a while before the election.
Mayor Chair, I'm glad you brought that up because I actually ran into a constituent at Marshall's as I was shopping, and her mother had an issue with the signature, and so her ballot, she got that information back to her home. So she had, because the signatures did not match up.
Yeah.
And the clerk's office did resubmit to her a new, that one obviously was spoiled, but they did submit to her a new ballot for her to be able to fill out. So the integrity that the clerk is providing, in my opinion, is very concise, and it is a integral system. So they did look at that signature to see that it was not matching up with her mother's signature. So I don't think that your argument is valid. Wow. And if you don't have factual information to prove that, then it seems like this is speculative in nature.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Santana. Senator Colbeck, I really appreciate all the time you put into the presentation and for your efforts at voter integrity and stuff. And so appreciate you being here today and submitting this to me, as well as some other information that I'll be making available to the group on process flow for Election Day. Any other members have a question? No. Yes?
Sorry, it's not a question, just a point of clarification. The Antrim County Clerk said that they pulled their numbers off the tapes. They didn't do an actual physical recount of the ballots.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that correction.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you very much, committee members. Appreciate it.
Okay. So now to those who have come here to testify, I have received your cards. If you are not familiar with the process and you want to testify, please find a a yellow card such as these and fill that out and turn that into one of the staff who's here today. I will be running a timer, and you'll hear an alarm go off when your 3 minutes are up. I will also give you a 1 minute. So with that,